The silver blade pressed against Jade's throat as she knelt in the center of the grand hall, her threadbare servant's dress torn at the shoulder where Lord Calix's guard had dragged her from the kitchens. Every vampire in the council chamber watched with hungry eyes as blood welled from the shallow cut, the scent filling the ornate space with crackling tension. "Confess what you stole from Lady Isidora's chamber, human, and I might grant you a quick death instead of leaving you for the sun," Calix hissed, his crimson eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Jade's hands trembled against the cold marble floor, her dark hair falling across her face as she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I didn't steal anything. I've never even been inside her chambers." "The ruby pendant was found in your quarters. Do you expect us to believe it simply appeared there?" The gathered nobles laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. Jade's heart hammered against her ribs as she searched the crowd for a single sympathetic face, and found none. She had served in House Ravencourt for 3 years, scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots, invisible to the vampires who ruled the night. Now she was finally seen, but only as prey. Lady Isidora stepped forward, her silk gown shimmering like liquid moonlight, her perfect features arranged in practiced distress. "That pendant was a gift from my mate. It's irreplaceable." Her voice caught just enough to sound genuine. "I trusted the human servants, and this is how my kindness is repaid." Jade wanted to scream that she'd watched Isidora's actual mate, Lord Dominic, give that same pendant to his mistress just 2 weeks ago. She wanted to tell them all that Isidora had planted it in her room to cover her own theft. But what good were a servant's words against a noble's lies? "Take her to the Eastern Tower. At dawn, we'll chain her to the roof and let the sun pass judgment." 2 guards hauled Jade to her feet, their grip bruising her arms. Panic flooded her veins, cold and sharp. She'd heard the screams of humans left for the sun, had seen their charred remains scraped from the stones. Her mother's face flashed through her mind, sick and frail in their tiny room at the edge of the estate. Without Jade's wages, she would starve. "Please," Jade whispered, hating the desperation in her voice. "My mother needs me. She's all I have." Calix tilted his head, his smile revealing elongated fangs. "Then perhaps she'll learn not to raise a thief." The guards dragged Jade through the twisting corridors of Ravencourt Manor, her feet stumbling over stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. The Eastern Tower loomed ahead, its narrow windows glowing with the last traces of moonlight. In a few hours, those same windows would frame her execution. They threw her into a circular chamber at the tower's peak, the door slamming shut with a finality that made her chest tighten. Jade pressed her palms against the cold stone wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The wound on her throat had stopped bleeding, but she could still feel the ghost of the blade against her skin. "I didn't steal anything," she said to the empty room, her voice cracking. "I didn't!" A sound like wind chimes echoed through the chamber, though no breeze stirred the stagnant air. Jade spun toward the source and froze. In the center of the floor, where nothing had been moments before, symbols glowed with pale silver light. They formed a perfect circle, intricate patterns weaving between ancient script she couldn't read. The light pulsed in rhythm with her racing heart. Jade took a hesitant step forward, then another. The symbols seemed to call to her, tugging at something deep in her chest. She knelt beside the circle and reached out with trembling fingers. The moment her hand touched the glowing marks, power exploded through her body like lightning through water. Jade screamed as centuries of memories that weren't hers flooded her mind. A goddess with eyes like starlight, weeping as she was cast down by jealous siblings. A bargain struck in desperation. A bloodline hidden in plain sight, scattered across generations, waiting for the right moment to awaken. She saw herself as she truly was, not the orphaned servant girl, but the last living descendant of Nicera, the forgotten goddess of blood and binding. The one the ancient vampires had tried to erase from history because her power threatened their control. Jade collapsed forward, her palms flat against the burning symbols as divine energy merged with her blood. Her veins glowed silver beneath her skin, branching out like luminous rivers. The pain was excruciating, as if her entire body was being remade from the inside out. She tasted copper and starlight, felt her heartbeat slow and strengthen, sensed something ancient and vast settling into her bones. When the light finally faded, Jade remained on her hands and knees, gasping for air that suddenly felt too thin. She raised her head and caught sight of her reflection in a tarnished mirror leaning against the wall. Her eyes, once simple brown, now held flecks of silver that moved like living things. Her skin seemed to glow from within, and when she touched her throat, she found the cut had healed completely, leaving only a faint silver scar. The tower door burst open. A guard stepped inside, his sword drawn. What was that light? The entire tower was glowing. He stopped mid-stride, his eyes widening as he stared at Jade. She watched confusion flash across his face, then fear. He could sense something had changed, even if he couldn't understand what. "Stay back," she warned, rising to her feet with a grace she'd never possessed before. The power hummed through her body, eager and wild. "Don't come any closer." What are you?" Jade didn't know how to answer. She wasn't human anymore, but she wasn't vampire either. She was something older, something the modern world had forgotten. The guard took a step toward her, his sword raised, and instinct took over. She thrust her hand forward, and silver light erupted from her palm. The guard flew backward, slamming into the stone wall with enough force to crack the mortar. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious, but breathing. Jade stared at her glowing hand, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and exhilaration. She had power now. Real power. But dawn was still coming, and she had no idea if her transformation would save her from the sun or condemn her to a different kind of death. She had to run, had to get to her mother and disappear before Calyx discovered what she'd become. Jade hurried past the fallen guard and down the spiral stairs, moving faster than she'd ever been able to before. The manor was mostly quiet. The vampires retired to their chambers to escape the approaching daylight. She made it to the servants' quarters without encountering anyone, slipping into the cramped room she shared with two other humans. Her mother lay on the narrow bed by the window, her breathing shallow, her skin paper-thin. "Mama," Jade whispered, kneeling beside her, "we have to go, now." Her mother's eyes fluttered open, clouded with fever and pain. "Jade, what's wrong? You're glowing." Jade looked down at her hands and realized the silver light still flickered beneath her skin, barely contained. She tried to will it away, but it only pulsed brighter. "I don't have time to explain. Please, just trust me." "You can't carry me, sweet girl. I'm too sick to travel." "I'm stronger now." Jade slipped her arms beneath her mother and lifted her easily, shocked by how light she felt. The power made everything effortless. Hold on to me." She moved through the manor like a ghost, avoiding the few servants still awake and the guards stationed at key passages. The eastern gate was unwatched at this hour, all attention focused on the main entrance. Jade pushed through it and stumbled into the pre-dawn darkness. The forest beyond the estate loomed like a wall of shadows, but Jade didn't hesitate. She ran, her mother clutched against her chest, the trees blurring past. Her lungs should have burned, her legs should have cramped, but the divine power sustained her. She ran until the manor disappeared behind them, until the forest grew so thick the moonlight barely penetrated. Only then did she stop, settling her mother gently against a massive oak tree. The older woman's eyes were closed, her breathing ragged. Jade pressed her glowing palm against her mother's chest and felt the power respond. Silver light flowed from her hand into her mother's body, seeking out sickness and decay. Her mother gasped, her eyes flying open as the fever broke. Color returned to her cheeks, and when she sat up, she moved without the trembling weakness that had plagued her for months. "What did you do?" she breathed, staring at her own hands as if expecting them to glow too. "I don't know," Jade admitted. "Something happened in the tower. I think I'm not entirely human. I never was." Her mother reached up to cup Jade's face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I always knew you were special. From the moment you were born, I knew." A branch cracked somewhere behind them. Jade whirled around, her hands already glowing with defensive power. 3 figures emerged from the shadows, moving with the predatory grace of vampires. They wore the black uniforms of Ravencourt's hunting party. The lead hunter stepped into a shaft of moonlight, revealing sharp features and calculating eyes. "Well, well, the little thief who escaped her execution. Lord Calyx will be very interested to learn you survived. She smells different now, stronger. And she's glowing. I've never seen a human do that." Jade positioned herself between the hunters and her mother, power crackling around her fingers. "Leave us alone! I don't want to hurt you!" The lead hunter laughed. "You don't want to hurt us? That's precious. Do you have any idea what happens to servants who run?" He lunged forward with inhuman speed. Jade reacted on instinct, throwing her hand up and releasing a blast of silver light. The energy hit him square in the chest and sent him flying backward into a tree. He slid to the ground, smoke rising from his scorched clothing, his eyes wide with shock. The other 2 hunters froze, staring at their fallen leader. Then they looked at Jade with expressions that mixed fear and hunger in equal measure. "What is she? Should we report this?" "Run!" Jade commanded, her voice resonating with power she was only beginning to understand. "Run back to Ravencourt and tell them to leave us alone. Tell them I'm under the protection of someone they don't want to anger." She had no idea if that was true, but the bluff worked. The 2 conscious hunters grabbed their companion and vanished into the forest, moving so fast they left only rustling leaves in their wake. Jade's hands stopped glowing as the adrenaline faded. She turned to her mother, who was watching her with a mixture of awe and concern. "We can't stay here," her mother said quietly. "They'll come back with more hunters. And worse." "I know." Jade helped her mother to her feet. "But where can we go? Every territory for 100 miles is controlled by vampire houses. We have nowhere safe." "There's one place." Her mother's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The Shadow Court, in the northern mountains. It's ruled by King Stephen, the oldest vampire in existence. They say he's so powerful that even the great houses fear him." Jade had heard stories of the Shadow Court, whispered among servants late at night. A place where ancient vampires dwelled, following laws and customs the newer houses had abandoned. A place where power was absolute and mercy was rare. "Why would we go there?" Jade asked. "That sounds more dangerous, not less." Her mother met her eyes with unexpected firmness. "Because Stephen made a vow centuries ago. Any being bearing the mark of the old gods would find sanctuary in his court, no questions asked." Jade touched her throat where the silver scar gleamed. "How do you know about that?" "Your father told me, before he disappeared. He said if you ever awakened, if you ever showed signs of what you truly were, to take you to the Shadow Court." Her mother's voice cracked. "I thought it was fever dreams when he said it. I never believed the old gods were real." The first hint of dawn touched the eastern horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray. Jade felt the approaching sun like a weight against her skin, but it didn't burn. Whatever she'd become, sunlight no longer meant death. Still, they needed shelter and answers. "The mountains are 3 days away on foot," Jade said. "Can you make it?" Her mother nodded, determination replacing weakness. "I can now, thanks to you. Lead the way." They traveled through the day, something no servant would have dared attempt in vampire territory. Jade carried her mother when exhaustion threatened, the divine power making the burden effortless. They avoided villages and roads, sticking to game trails and dense forests where detection was less likely. By sunset on the second day, they reached the foothills of the northern mountains. Jade could sense eyes watching them from the shadows, but no one approached. Perhaps word of what she'd done to the hunters had spread. Perhaps the vampires here were simply more cautious. The Shadow Court's territory began at a massive gate carved from black stone, ancient symbols etched into its surface. 2 guards stood watch, their armor decorated with silver ravens. They watched Jade and her mother approach with expressions of cold evaluation. "State your purpose. Uninvited guests are not welcome in the Shadow Court." Jade stepped forward, letting the silver light pulse beneath her skin. "I seek sanctuary under the old laws. I bear the mark of Nisara, and I claim protection." The guard's eyes widened. They exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then the one on the left nodded. "Wait here. I'll inform the king." He disappeared through the gate, leaving Jade and her mother standing in uncomfortable silence with the remaining guard. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Jade's enhanced hearing picked up movement beyond the gate. Dozens of vampires gathering, their whispers carrying on the wind. Finally, the gate opened fully. The returning guard bowed. "King Stephen will see you immediately. Follow me." They walked through a courtyard carved into the mountainside, surrounded by buildings that looked ancient even by vampire standards. Everywhere Jade looked, she saw vampires watching her with expressions ranging from curiosity to hostility. Her mother clutched her arm, trembling despite the healing. The throne room was a massive cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls covered in murals depicting battles and ceremonies from an age when gods walked among mortals. And at the far end, seated on a throne of black stone and silver, sat the most striking man Jade had ever seen. King Stephen looked young, perhaps 30 in human terms, but his eyes held the weight of millennia. His features were sharp and aristocratic, his black hair falling to his shoulders, his presence so commanding that Jade felt the urge to kneel even before he spoke. He wore simple dark clothing that somehow made him look more regal than any ceremonial robes could have. His gaze locked onto Jade, and she felt him probe her with power so vast it made her transformation seem like a candle beside a bonfire. She met his stare, refusing to look away, her own silver light rising in response to his inspection. For a long moment, no one in the throne room breathed. Then Stephen rose from his throne and descended the steps with inhuman grace. He stopped directly in front of Jade, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his otherwise black eyes. Nisara's mark. I never thought I'd see it again. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying authority that made her bones vibrate. I knew your ancestor. She was magnificent and terrible, and the world grew darker when she fell. Jade's throat tightened. You knew her? How is that possible? I am older than most vampires remember. I walked this earth when the gods were still tangible, before they faded into myth. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the silver scar on her throat. This mark means you carry her bloodline and her power. It also means you're in terrible danger. I already know that, Jade said, trying to keep her voice steady. House Ravencourt wants me dead. Ravencourt is nothing. They're children playing at power. Stephen's eyes hardened. But there are others who remember the old gods, who remember the threat Nisara posed to their control. If they learn you've awakened, they'll unite to destroy you before you can reach your full potential. Her mother spoke up, her voice stronger than Jade expected. That's why we came here. You swore an oath to protect bearers of the divine marks. Stephen's gaze shifted to her mother, and something like respect crossed his face. You know the old laws. Good. He looked back at Jade. Yes, I swore that oath. You have my protection for as long as you remain in the Shadow Court. But protection comes with conditions. Jade's stomach tightened. What kind of conditions? You will train. You will learn to control the power flowing through you before it destroys you from the inside. And you will submit to my authority while you're here. I can't have someone with divine blood running wild in my court. It wasn't a request. Jade looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Stephen. And if I agree, what happens then? A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. Then we see if you can survive what's coming. Because when the other houses learn you're here, they'll test my resolve. They'll want to know if I'm willing to go to war over one marked girl. Are you? Jade asked, meeting his gaze directly. Stephen's smile widened, revealing fangs. I've been looking for an excuse to remind them why they fear the Shadow Court. You just might be it. He turned and gestured to a female vampire standing near the throne, her silver hair braided with black ribbons. Morgana, arrange chambers for our guests. The suite in the East Wing. The vampire bowed. As you command, my king. As Morgana led Jade and her mother away, Jade glanced back to find Stephen still watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She couldn't tell if he saw her as a person, a weapon, or simply an interesting problem to solve. Maybe all three. The chambers were larger than any space Jade had ever occupied, with a sitting room, separate bedrooms, and windows overlooking a valley shrouded in perpetual twilight. Her mother immediately collapsed onto one of the plush chairs, exhaustion finally catching up with her. Rest, Jade urged. I'll keep watch. You need rest too, her mother murmured, her eyes already closing. But Jade couldn't rest. She paced the room, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she'd been a servant, facing execution. Now she was under the protection of the most powerful vampire in existence, marked by a forgotten goddess, hunted by forces she didn't understand. A knock on the door made her jump. She opened it to find Stephen standing in the corridor, alone and somehow even more imposing, without his court around him. "Walk with me. We need to talk." Jade glanced at her sleeping mother, then stepped into the corridor and closed the door softly. "About what?" "About what you felt when the mark awakened. About the memories that aren't yours." He started walking, and she fell into step beside him. "About whether you're ready for what those memories mean." They walked through the shadow court in silence, descending deeper into the mountain through passages lit by phosphorescent fungi. Jade realized he was taking her somewhere private, away from listening ears. Finally, they emerged into a cavern dominated by a still, black pool. Silver light danced across its surface, though there was no obvious source. "This is the reflection pool," Stephen said quietly. "One of the few places where the barrier between the mortal world and the divine realm is thin. Look into it." Jade knelt beside the pool and stared into its depths. Her reflection stared back, but wrong. Her eyes glowed pure silver, her skin shimmered with divine light, and behind her stood a woman who looked like an older version of herself, beautiful and terrible, with stars in her eyes and blood dripping from her hands. "Nisara," Jade whispered. The reflection nodded. When it spoke, the voice echoed in Jade's mind rather than her ears. "Hello, daughter of my blood. I've waited so long to speak with you." Jade's hands trembled. "Why me? Why did you choose me?" "I didn't choose you. You were born to this, as were your mothers before you, stretching back through generations. But you're the first in centuries strong enough to hold my full power without breaking." Stephen's reflection appeared beside hers in the pool. He looked at Nisara with an expression Jade couldn't quite read. "You should have warned her before awakening. She's not prepared for what this means." Nisara's laugh was bitter. "There's no way to prepare for divinity, forced into mortal flesh. She'll adapt, or she'll burn. That's how it's always been." "She's not a weapon for you to wield," Stephen said, his voice hardening. "If you try to use her against her will, you'll answer to me." The goddess turned her starlight gaze on him. "Still playing hero, Stephen? After everything you've seen, everything you've done? You can't save everyone." "No, but I can save her." The reflection shattered, leaving only Jade's normal face staring back at her. She looked up at Stephen, who was watching her with that same intense focus. "What did she mean, use me?" Jade asked. Stephen sighed and sat on a rock beside the pool. Nisara was cast down by the other gods because she tried to unite vampires and humans under her rule. She believed that mixing divine blood with vampire and human bloodlines would create a new race, one strong enough to challenge even the gods. The other deities saw it as corruption and rebellion. They killed her, or tried to. But you can't truly kill a god. You can only diminish them, scatter their essence, and wait for them to reform through their descendants. Jade's stomach dropped. "So I'm what? Her attempt to come back?" "You're the vessel for her power, whether she inhabits you fully or not. And yes, if you grow strong enough, she could potentially use your body to manifest in the mortal realm again." He met her eyes. "But that's only if you let her. Divine blood doesn't mean you don't have a choice." "What would you do?" Jade asked. "If you were me?" Stephen was quiet for a long moment. I'd learned to master the power so thoroughly that if Nisera tried to possess me, I could burn her out of my blood. And I'd surround myself with people strong enough to kill me if I failed. The casual way he discussed her potential death should have terrified Jade, but instead, it steadied her. He wasn't offering false comfort or empty promises, just truth. "Will you teach me?" she asked. "Will you help me become strong enough?" "Yes, but understand what you're asking. Training someone with divine blood is brutal. Your body will break and heal dozens of times. You'll face pain that would drive most minds mad. And there's no guarantee of success." Jade thought of her mother, sleeping peacefully upstairs, healed for the first time in years. She thought of Lady Isadora's cruel smile and Lord Calix's blade against her throat. She thought of the goddess's words, "Adapt or burn." "When do we start?" Stephen's eyes gleamed with something like approval. "Tomorrow, at sunset. Get what rest you can. You'll need it." But as they walked back through the twisting passages, Stephen's hand suddenly shot out, stopping Jade in her tracks. His head tilted, listening to something she couldn't hear. "We have visitors. Multiple vampires approaching the court's borders. They're not here for a social call." Jade's heart hammered. "Ravencourt?" "And others. It seems word of your arrival spread faster than I anticipated." He turned to face her fully, his expression deadly serious. "Listen carefully. What happens next will set the tone for your entire time here. The other houses will test my commitment to protecting you. They'll demand I hand you over or face consequences. How I respond will determine whether we have peace or war." "I don't want people to die because of me," Jade said. Stephen's laugh was sharp. "People die every day, Jade. The only question is whether their deaths mean something." He started walking again, faster now. "Come, let's see what price they've put on your head." They reached the throne room to find it already filled with vampires, the tension thick enough to choke on. Morgana stood near the throne, her hand on her sword. Other members of Stephen's court formed a protective semicircle, their faces grim. And, standing in the center of it all, were 5 vampires Jade recognized from her time at Ravencourt. Lord Calix stood at their head, his crimson eyes burning with rage. Beside him was Lady Isadora, her beautiful face twisted with malicious satisfaction. The others she knew by reputation, Lord Dominic, Lord Thane, and Lady Ravenna, some of the most powerful nobles in the southern territories. Calix's gaze locked onto Jade, and his lip curled back in a snarl. "There she is, the thief who escaped justice. King Stephen, we demand you return her to us immediately." Stephen moved past Jade and climbed the steps to his throne with deliberate slowness. He settled into the seat, radiating power and authority. "You demand? In my court? You forget yourself, Calix." Lord Dominic stepped forward, his tone more diplomatic. "With respect, Your Majesty, this is not a matter of territory or politics. The girl stole from Lady Isadora and was sentenced to death, according to our laws. We're simply asking that justice be served." "Your laws have no power here. This is Shadow Court territory, and my laws are absolute." Stephen leaned forward. "But tell me, what proof do you have of this theft?" Lady Isadora pulled a ruby pendant from her bodice, holding it up to catch the light. "This is the pendant she stole. It was recovered from her quarters." Jade's anger flared. You put it there yourself. I saw you with Lord Dominic's mistress. That pendant was never yours. Isadora's face flushed. How dare you accuse me? You filthy! Silence. Stephen's single word cracked through the room like thunder. He rose from his throne and descended the steps, his gaze fixed on the pendant. Morgana, what do you sense from that jewelry? The silver-haired vampire moved forward and examined the pendant without touching it. Her nose wrinkled. It reeks of manipulation magic, my king. And at least 3 different blood signatures. The girl's is the faintest, likely from contact when it was planted. Calix's face darkened. This is ridiculous. We didn't come here to debate evidence with... You came into my court, making accusations and demands. Now you'll stand there and accept my judgment. Stephen's power filled the room, pressing down on everyone except Jade. Even the visiting nobles flinched. The girl is innocent of theft. And even if she weren't, she now bears the mark of Nysara and falls under my protection by ancient law. Your claim on her is void. Lord Thane found his voice. You would risk conflict with 5 houses over one marked girl? She's just a human, Stephen. Whatever power she's developed, it's not worth. She is worth exactly as much as I say she is. And I say she stays. Stephen's eyes began to glow with power that made Jade's divine light look like a spark beside a star. Now leave my territory before I decide that your trespassing requires a more permanent response. The 5 nobles exchanged glances. Jade could see the calculation in their eyes, weighing their desire for revenge against the very real threat Stephen posed. Calix looked like he wanted to argue, but Lady Ravenna put a hand on his arm. This isn't over, Calix spat. The Council of Houses will hear about this. You can't protect her forever. I've been alive for over 3,000 years, Calix. Your definition of forever is considerably shorter than mine. The nobles turned and swept from the throne room, their fury palpable. But as they reached the door, Isadora looked back at Jade with pure hatred in her eyes. Enjoy your sanctuary, servant. It won't last. After they left, the tension in the room slowly dissipated. Stephen returned to his throne looking unbothered by the confrontation, but Jade's hands were shaking with residual adrenaline. Morgana approached her. That took courage, speaking the truth in front of them. Most would have stayed silent. What good is survival if you have to live with lies? Jade replied. Stephen's voice cut through the murmurs of the court. Well said. Morgana, post extra guards at all borders. They'll likely try something more subtle next time. And send word to our allies. I want it known throughout the territories that the girl is under my direct protection. It will be done, my king. As the court dispersed, Stephen gestured for Jade to approach the throne. She climbed the steps, aware of dozens of eyes tracking her movement. You handled that well. But you need to understand something. By defending you like that, I've drawn a line in the sand. The other houses will see it as a challenge to their authority. Some will back down, others will escalate. Are you prepared for what that means? Jade thought about her mother, finally safe and healing. She thought about the power flowing through her veins, still largely untamed. She thought about Nysara's words, adapt or burn. I won't hide while others fight my battles, she said firmly. Teach me to fight. Teach me to be strong enough that they'll think twice before challenging you again. Stephen studied her for a long moment, then smiled. It was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face from coldly beautiful to something almost warm. Careful what you wish for, Jade. But I like your spirit. We'll begin tomorrow night, as planned. In the meantime, rest. Spend time with your mother. This might be your last piece for a while. Jade nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. One more thing. When you touched the circle in the tower, when Nicera's power awakened in you, what did you feel? Fear? Excitement? She considered the question carefully. Both. And something else. Purpose. Like I'd been searching for something my whole life without knowing it. And suddenly, I found it. Good. Hold on to that feeling. You'll need it in the days ahead. That night, Jade lay in her comfortable bed in the shadow court, staring at the ceiling as her mother slept peacefully in the next room. She could feel the divine power humming just beneath her skin, eager to be used. Could feel the weight of Nicera's presence at the edge of her consciousness, watching and waiting. Tomorrow, her real training would begin. Tomorrow, she would start the journey from servant to something far more dangerous. But tonight, she let herself simply breathe and remember that she was alive, safe, and no longer alone in the darkness. In his own chambers, Stephen stood by the window, looking out over his territory. Morgana joined him, silent and observant as always. "You're certain about this?" she asked quietly. "The girl has potential, but she's untrained. Raw power without control is as much a threat as a weapon." "I'm certain. And you're right that she's dangerous. But do you know what's more dangerous? Letting another house claim her and use her power against us. Or worse, letting the old god's enemies find her before she's ready." "You care about her already," Morgana observed. "I can see it." Stephen didn't deny it. "She reminds me of someone I failed to protect long ago. And she has the kind of courage that gets people killed unless someone stronger stands beside them. I won't make the same mistake twice." "Even if it means war?" He turned to face his oldest friend and advisor, his expression hard. "Especially if it means war. The other houses have grown too comfortable, too arrogant. They've forgotten what true power looks like. Perhaps it's time for a reminder." Morgana smiled, sharp and fierce. "Then I suppose we'd better make sure the girl survives her training. Can't remind them of anything if she burns out before she blooms." "She won't burn. I've seen that look in her eyes before. She'll bend, she'll break, but she won't burn. And when she finally masters what she is, the whole world will remember why the marked ones were feared." Outside, storm clouds gathered over the shadow court, and in the southern territories, 5 furious nobles plotted revenge. But inside the mountain fortress, Jade slept deeply, dreaming of starlight and blood, of a goddess's fall and a servant's rise. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, her real story would begin. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, big shout out to our viewers from Fort Wayne, Indiana, USA, Canada, Michigan, London, Queensland, Birmingham, UK, Long Island, New York, Albany, Central Florida, California, Missouri. Thank you for being part of my small, humble community. To our growing viewers, comment below which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!